fear of getting hurt again. One of the things that trauma can do to us is take away our ability to trust and put us in a constant state of worrying and wondering, how am I going to keep myself safe now moving forward? One young woman from a small town in Michigan. She had a dream that she was going to be a famous singer, dancer. She just loved performance ever since she was a child. Performing was just her entire existence, her entire being. It meant everything to her to get a job in the performing arts. And so she moved off to New York, the big city, as soon as she could afford it as a young woman. And she gets there, and before she really knows anyone, before she really knows the city, she's a little bit naive. And I think the way the story went is she wanted to, a man offered to allow her to use his phone. And as obviously this was back before cell phones and all that. And so she went inside of this man's house so that she could use his phone. And unfortunately, this man did not have good intentions, and she ended up being sexually assaulted on this occasion. Now, this assault for her was obviously a trauma. It crossed her mind, I could always go back home now, give up on my dreams, especially given what happened. How can I feel safe staying here in the big city? Seeing how cruel people can be, how will I be able to move forward, meet people, network, audition? But for whatever reason, in her case, she decided, no, I'm going to stay. So after she finished her physical treatment for the assault that she underwent, she decided to stay and continue to pursue her dream. And well, as history would have it, she ended up successful in her pursuit. And she landed a record deal and started releasing songs. And some of those songs became #1 hits. And she started breaking records. And she went on to become probably the most, if not one of the most famous, successful female pop performers in history. She absolutely changed the world. She impacted generations, changed fashion and music, and everyone knows who she is. She definitely made her mark on the world and achieved her dream. But you'll notice that she had a basis to stop. She had an excuse as to why she could walk away from purpose. But she decided to continue to pursue her dream despite what happened to her. So she didn't allow her fear of getting hurt again to stop her. In fact, she's actually a symbol of female empowerment. But many people go through situations similar to hers, and they allow that to now dictate their life. Okay, well, now that this has happened to me, I won't live in this city anymore. I won't pursue this job anymore. I'll give up on my dreams. I'll move back home, right? And the list goes on. All of the things a person might do as a reaction to the world traumatizing them, the world being cruel to them. And so they change everything about their plans. It really starts to define them. They allow the trauma to define them. We didn't even know about this female singer's trauma until she told us about it decades after she had already been successful. And it was her story to tell. She didn't have to. But ultimately, when asked why you never shared, she just simply said that she decided she didn't want to be defined by what happened to her. And well, she succeeded because she's not defined by that. Most people know who she is, but they don't even know that she was assaulted. And so when we go through our traumas, as dramatic or as undramatic as they may seem, we have the same question that we have to ask ourselves, which is, now what am I going to do moving forward? How am I going to now conduct my life, and how will I keep myself safe? Now we have to deal with this fear of being hurt again in a way that we may not have originally even realized we could be hurt, or even realize people could be that cruel. So how do we move forward when we have a fear of getting hurt again? When we use this word trauma, a trauma is anything that violates the self, that's a distressing event that causes a uh, undesirable change in us. Even though what she went through was a trauma or even traumatizing by definition, she didn't allow herself to stay traumatized. By making the choice to continue on her career path, continue to pursue her dreams, she made the choice not to remain in the traumatized state. And so she poured her feelings into her work and made a success out of her decision. So likewise, we can undergo a traumatic event, but we can also choose not to remain traumatized by what happened to us. Now, the traumatization doesn't mean it's like our fault or like we're being traumatized on purpose. It's an automated system of the subconscious mind. When your subconscious recognizes that you've been through a traumatizing, a boundary crossing event, something has violated you or what is sacred to you, it looks for ways to prevent that from happening again. Now, your subconscious mind can't change the world around it. Only you, the controller of the physical body, can take action, right, to change your situation. So the subconscious mind has to communicate to you when it believes that you could be in danger. And that's where we get the flashbacks or the anxiety, or in some cases, it's depression, the pangs of distress, the panic attacks, and many of the symptoms of complex trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder, are our body being synonymous with the subconscious mind, is our body's way of communicating to us that it believes we are in danger and it wants us to take action as the controller of the body. So that's why those feelings are so intense, because it's a communication that you could be in danger. It's really a good system. It's a sophisticated system. If you are traumatized, it doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It doesn't mean something is wrong. It just means that you are trying to figure out subconsciously how to stay safe. It means you have a fear of getting hurt again. Now you have to decide, am I going to allow this feeling, this fear, to define the rest of my life? Or am I going to override the system? As the controller of the physical body, you can override the system. This woman had to override her system when she contemplated going back home after what happened to her. She overrode the system and said, you know what I'm going to do? What I feel will be most beneficial for me is to continue to pursue my dream. And it turned out she was right. It turned out she was right. There's no chance that she would have looked back 30 years later after going back to her hometown and not achieving her dreams and being defined by that event. And she would have said, I'm pleased with the way things worked out. In this case, she made sure that she had something to show for all of her sacrifice and all of her suffering. She made sure that she made her impact on the world. And so we need to make a choice as well. And the choice is to override the subconscious system, which is designed to keep us safe. That's the default programming. So your subconscious system is designed default to keep you safe. You have to decide when to override it. So you can look at any situation at any time, no matter what has happened to you, and you can decide, I'm not going to allow this to define me. You have that choice always. No matter how bad the trauma was, no matter how many years it lasted, you have the choice to be able to decide, I'm not going to allow this to define me. No doubt it's going to impact me, it's going to change me, but it doesn't have to define me. And we avoid it from defining us by pursuing purpose always and love and allowing our love and purpose to be what is definitive of us, our pursuit of purpose, our dreams to be definitive of us. So, what's stopping you from overriding the system? Maybe it's just that you didn't know that you were supposed to override your system. Maybe it's because it just feels so distressing when you're feeling triggered by the event. It just feels so distressing that you feel you are supposed to submit to those feelings. But let today be your moment to realize you have permission to break free. Give yourself permission to break free of allowing that event to trauma to define you. When we think about the heinous crimes that the other people did to us, and usually our trauma does come from abuse, not always, but very often it comes from abuse, mistreatment, neglect. When we think about the awful ways that those people treated us, and maybe even the awful people that they are, they don't deserve more of us than they've already taken. And so we want to look at the belief system around why we're remaining in the fight, flight, freeze, fawn mode, and recognize that some of those beliefs may need to be changed so that we can get out of that and get into our self-actualization mode. So, what are your beliefs that are keeping you feeling like you're going to let that trauma define you? What's making you feel like you're going to let your trauma, you're going to let what happened to you define you? Is it learned helplessness? The belief now that since something like this, something so bad has happened to you, there is nothing you can do on this planet to influence your future? Do you feel like you have no impact on what happens to you now? Is that what it is? Learned helplessness is the belief that we don't have the ability to control what happens to us. We don't have the ability to control what our future will be. Is that what's stopping you from not allowing your trauma to define you? Is that what's causing you to decide that this trauma will be definitive of you, that you will be defined by something that someone else did to you? Let's remember that the abuser doesn't deserve any more of us. They've taken enough. Do you agree? Yeah, they've taken enough. So we don't have to allow them to define who we are, what happened to define who we are. So what about you? What's causing you to feel like you're going to allow that trauma to dictate the rest of your life? Is it the fact that you're still in contact with your abuser, that abuser is still in your life? Like when we have a narcissistic spouse or parents, and we're co-parenting, or we have a business with the narcissistic person, so they're still in our life, so we still stay stuck in trauma mode, and we're just the perpetual victim. Are you perpetually victimizing yourself? It's time to cut that out. What do we need to do with toxic people? Does anyone know? What should we do with toxic people? Go ahead and write it in the comments if you know. Well, what should we do with toxic people? We got to get away from them. We got to detach from them. We got to ignore them. We got to leave them. We got to go no contact with them. Yeah, we have to cut them out of our life. Snip, snip. That's what we have to recognize. When someone is toxic, we have to cut them out of our lives. This is the number one step to healing. Okay, this is science. If you are drinking poison and getting sick, you go to the doctor, The doctor says, we might be able to heal you, we might be able to resuscitate, but we are going to need you to do one thing. And you know what the doctor is going to tell you to do. He's going to say, you're going to need to stop drinking poison. Okay? So the toxic person, toxic is poison. That toxic person is poisonous to our system energetically. They say things, and just their very presence can hurt us. So if you have the narcissistic mother that just never showed you love, never treated you as equal to the other kids or as even human, she doesn't even need to say anything. Just her being in the room is traumatizing. It continues to be abusive. Just her being there because she continues to treat you as if you're not important or special. You understand? So just cutting off all contact with her is the way that you stop yourself from staying in the perpetual victimization. I am constantly going to be the victim of my mother. Just cut them off. Cut them out of your life. Don't attend the gatherings where they're going to be because the level of abuse is just too dark. It's too violating of your soul, of your well-being. So we need to snip, snip, cut them out. Okay. So, but what if you have to keep them in your life because you're a co-parent or you have to keep them in your life because they're your boss? Well, don't use can't. Stop saying I can't. You're not actually trapped. If you're in a situation where temporarily you're going to choose to allow yourself to have contact, you must number one, recognize that it's going to stunt your healing because you're choosing to allow yourself to have contact for the time being. So that's going to mean that you're still getting poison. Number two, you're going to need to cut as much poison as possible. That's the answer to your question. It's always going to be to cut out the toxic person. I'm not going to say, oh, your toxic person is your baby mama. Okay, then you don't have to cut. You don't have to cut toxic people, but everyone else does. No, it's going to be the same thing. You still have to cut the toxic people. Still got to cut them. And if you're choosing, or even you're by law obligated to not cut them completely, then you got to cut them to the extent possible. So what's stopping you from not allowing this trauma to be definitive? A lot of times what we haven't done as trauma survivors is taken the time to just sit back and meditate so that we can process the trauma properly. The proper context of the trauma has to be properly defined. When you're looking at the trauma as this happened to me, so I am at fault. That's not the proper context. Got it wrong. You look at it like that, and it's detrimental to you. So you're just allowing yourself to be harmed worse by the trauma. If you're looking at the trauma and you're contextualizing it as you have the ability or the responsibility to prevent all future suffering, that's incorrect as well. Okay, so what happened to you wasn't your fault. You don't have the power to prevent anything from ever happening again. When you contextualize it as you can't handle it happening again, that's also false. You survived it. You survived it. So looking at your trauma in terms of powerlessness, I can't handle it, I can't, just keeps you stuck in the traumatized state. So what's the proper context for your trauma? Proper context is what happened to me was not my fault. It could happen again, but it is now less likely to happen again. Why? Because I do know things now. I am wiser as a result, and I'm going to take the lessons from the past. I'm going to take the lessons from this situation, and I'm going to utilize them to help myself to be more safe moving forward. That's the proper way to contextualize what you went through. It's not my fault. I am empowered by having gone through it because now I know things that I didn't know before that can help me to navigate life so as to minimize the likelihood of this happening again. But if it happens again, yes, I can handle it. Yes, I can get through it. And I'll be able to minimize the damage this time. if it were to happen again. But also it's less likely to happen again to me if I take the time to meditate and learn the lessons from it. So we should allow ourselves to be changed sometimes by what happened to us, but we need to allow ourselves to be changed for the better. I'm a better man now because of the way I was treated. I'm a better woman now. I'm wiser now because of what I went through. You see how the woman in the beginning of the story, the pop star, could take the situation and contextualize it properly. No, it's not my fault that that happened. It's not because of my dream that I came out here that that happened to me. The dream is not the problem. I am not the problem. That man was the problem. And now that I know that can happen, I can become wiser and more savvy in the way that I move through this industry and through the city. And by doing that, I can prevent this from happening to an extent. I can lessen the likelihood that this happens to me again, because now I know how I might handle it, right? We can become wiser from the situation. It's not your fault, but you can grow. If you don't grow, you remain traumatized in the chrysalis state, then really it was all for nothing that you underwent it. So we have the ability to take whatever happened to us and to make it meaningful. We have the ability to overcome the the heinous evil that we've been through, like flipping it for good. Because in that way, we're an imitation of our Creator, who can take anything, even what's evil, even what's dark, and turn it into the precipice for what is good and what's light. So this week, work on recontextualizing the situation. You want to think in the way, that's your belief system, but you also want to have the bias of a resilient person. The bias of the resilient person is leaning on their personal power. It's believing in themselves, believing in their ability to overcome difficulty, believing in their ability to reprocess difficulty, to be resilient to adversity. Understanding that adversity is a part of the universe that we live in, alienated from God, and we live in a fallen world. So recognizing the world the way it is, seeing the universe as it is, but then understanding that you have personal power to take knowledge, which is a basis of power, the type of power, you take knowledge and you apply it, which is wisdom, so that you can prevent these things from happening in the future. You can minimize the possibility that something like this would happen to you again. And in having the bias of personal power and the bias of positivity, things can work out, things can go well. I will not fall again. Having that bias, that thinking, even if it seems a bit delusional, is the most beneficial way of thinking for you moving forward. And you must process yourself, your life, and everything that happened to you in a way that's beneficial. That's your job as the boss of the self, as the human that's leading the physical body. Your job is to process everything in a way that's going to be to your benefit. Does that make sense? So now we have to take the worst thing that's ever happened to us and reprocess it as to how will this now work to my benefit? Oh, wow, this helps me to be more empathetic to others who this has happened to. This is going to help me to help others, to protect others. This is going to help me to be able to protect myself in the future. This is going to help me to learn. This is going to help me to be less naive. Going to the extremes to protect ourselves, I won't talk to any people anymore. I won't talk to any of a certain gender anymore, or I'm not going to trust anyone anymore. Those extremes are not the way that keep ourselves safe. Ironically, they make us more susceptible to future abuse and traumatization because they deregulate our system so that we're not resilient and we're more sensitive. And they create where they make us fertile for abuse and deceit again in the future because we become desperate. Through not trusting others, we are losing out on the benefits of connection, and then we become desperate for connection, at which point the narcissist comes in and is able to fool you easier than ever. The easiest persons that a narcissist can fool are persons who are operating on the false assumption that they know what someone's character is by reading them, or because they had an abuser before, they know what all abusers are going to look like. Those people are operating on false assumptions. A covert narcissist sees that and comes in, and they know how to act exactly in a way that would make you believe that they are a good person because you're operating on a false presumption. The true presumption is anyone could fool me at any time. Anyone could lie to me. So rather than me trying to discern who's good and who's bad, I'm just going to become someone who's highly boundaried, highly assertive, someone who speaks up for themselves, someone who is savvy in the art of communication. That's what protects us. And that's what ultimately the covert narcissist won't be able to outlast very strong boundaries and high assertiveness. They can't outlast that. Only a healthy person can penetrate those defenses because the healthy person accepts your boundaries. And so they'll actually be healthy for you. And they'll say, oh, okay, I understand, no problem. I'm sorry. And with all that healthy behavior, they're going to keep coming back and say, I still love you. I still think you're great, despite that. And they're going to still show up as lovable to you, despite the fact that you've expressed your boundaries, despite the fact that you've been assertive, despite the fact that you're not nice, that you're not pleasing. Those are things that's going to protect you. You have to change for the better. And that's resilience instead of traumatization. You have to change for the better. So allow the trauma, the abuse that you've experienced to be the basis, the jumping point, the starting point of you becoming the best version of yourself that has ever lived. Allow what you've gone through to have some beneficial meaning or purpose. It's already happened. Why should we allow it to only be a definition of bad and evil in our lives? Why should we look back and say, I was going to go to school, but the trauma happened. I was going to become a WNBA player, but the trauma happened. I was going to start a family, but the trauma happened. No, it should be just the opposite. It should be now I'm more equipped than ever. After going through what I've been through, now I'm someone with a story. Now I'm a success story. Now I'm more equipped than ever to do what it is I want to do. Does that make sense? You guys have done great tonight. So let's remember from our discussion tonight, not to allow the fear of getting hurt again to prevent us from living in our purpose. And let's instead allow our love and our purpose to allow us to supersede, to overcome the fear of getting hurt again, to adopt the proper mindset, the proper bias, and then follow up with the actions that are going to help you. Some of the best actions are meditation every day, along with exercise every day. We need those. We need that for the brain. Exercising every day helps to fluff up the hippocampus so that you're less likely to develop Alzheimer's. So I want to help you to stay healthy. This is your chance. Daily exercise, daily meditation, daily edification. Now I'm making edifying videos and daily meditations and dropping them on our app, Mind by Roman Zanoni. You download it on the Apple App Store, on the Google Play Store. Mind by Roman Zanoni. Every single day, I'm getting up with you and I'm doing the meditation. I drop it there as a recording so that whenever you wake up, before you even wipe the sleep out of your eyes, you can just turn the meditation on. You're going to hear my voice. It's going to sound like this. I'm going to say, good morning. Let us begin our meditation for the day. And then we're going to start getting the mind moving in the correct direction so that we're in gratitude, so that we're in resilience, so that we are healing from the trauma. And that's what I want for you. And that's why I've created it. And that's why my team is working hard behind the scenes, sustaining this app. So make sure you go and download the app, Mind by Roman Zanoni.